excited to kick the conversation to Orlando, Florida, to hear about what is happening in the community. So I'll pass it to Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you to the first fireside chat here. I think it's a great transition to hear about the individual personal stories, and then I'm excited to talk with you, Frank, a little bit about your role in Orlando and how you're telling these personal stories, but you're also coordinating the entire Central Florida response to housing. So I wonder if I could hand it over to you to sort of lay the landscape of what's happening in Central Florida for us.
Sure, fantastic. So thanks so much, Caitlin, and thank you to our friends at New America and the League of Cities and all the other great hosts for this. This is a wonderful event. It's been a fantastic conversation so far. My organization, Bright Community Trust, works on housing access and housing affordability issues and related community development work in several regions of the state of Florida. Housed, that you see here in my background, is our Central Florida affiliate. So we kept a careful eye on what was happening with evictions as well as on federal supports, right? The CARES Act dollars that came down, the federal unemployment supplement and so forth. But when it became obvious by, say, midsummer last summer that we weren't going to have any additional action from Congress to continue to support, particularly people who were unemployed, and then we saw those dollars run out at the end of July. And at the same time, we're watching at that level, we all had state level moratoriums, and in some cases, city or county level moratoriums. We were seeing this month by month extension, and we would get down to the 30th of June and see the moratorium extended 30 more days and kind of all hold our breath till the last second to see what's going to happen. We started talking to colleagues in August and said, we need to have some kind of response in order here because these these unemployment benefits are going to dry up. People are going to have no resources to deal with the potential for eviction, and the rental assistance programs are trying to get up and running now, but we don't have much of a safety net here. So in September last year, we convened a really broad swath of the community that's responding to this eviction crisis. So that's, of course, our city and county partners, particularly in the 3 counties around the Orlando metro area. That's our county court system. That's also our legal aid and community legal services folks. But it's also on the other side of the table, the apartment association and the landlords, and then a whole bunch of nonprofits that work in this sector pretty broadly around the table, including like our continuum of care, our public housing agencies, our United Way, and a bunch of other providers, so that we can have a 360-degree conversation around how do we prevent as many people getting evicted as possible. And so glad that we did it. We've seen all kinds of changes coming our way, but it's let us really share best practices back and forth, respond to the data kind of on the fly. We had a meeting this morning and we're seeing, news coming down from Washington, guidance on this state and local fiscal support program, the $350 billion that could provide additional housing support. Things are changing so quickly, we've got to be able to respond rapidly. And this lets us do that.
That I think that you pulling on that thread of having the 360 response and really intentionally building in so many different voices to this conversation. Can you expand on that? Where has the conversation about data been most useful? Is it getting people to the table? Is it directing people where to put their interventions most sort of effectively? How has data kind of played into this overall response?
So we were fortunate that on our very first call, kind of as a benefit of relationships with our judiciary, we were able to get the county court judge who oversees our evictions docket in Orange County to come and bring us live. Here's how many evictions are getting filed. At that point, it was a vanishingly small number, but not non-existent. And to have the conversation about what's actually happening in the process, because there's an eviction filing, but that's different from a judgment and a writ of possession, right? And as we came to understand more about this data, we were also getting data from our friends at the apartment association who were able to bring to the table, their constituents are the larger landlords in the community. So they're able to tell us how many evictions do they have underway, but also look deeper into the data because they have information on how many tenants are on payment plans that are not being evicted yet, but are in some danger of being evicted. And as we went further down this process, we realized that there were more granular bits of data that we could discern that are helpful in focusing our response. So the apartment association, for instance, started to track last fall information on how many leases were being abandoned, right? I know there's just no way I'm ever going to be able to catch up with this. There's no prospect of my job coming back. Here's the keys. I'm out the door. In a lot of cases, that's a negotiated settlement kind of process. That's preferable to having an eviction filed and having that on your record. So, we were able to start tracking some things like that, as well as start getting a little bit of data on how often the CDC moratorium or a CDC declaration is being made on behalf of a tenant. Helps to have our friends from legal aid and community legal services on the conversations for that. We still feel like, though, there are a lot of gaps there. The reporting that we're getting is kind of some headline numbers, but we don't know how many evictions were filed. And then somebody reached out and got emergency rental assistance dollars and made up that deficit, but the case hasn't been released. How many of those are still out there versus how many are pending and going to move forward with a final judgment? We're even starting to hear of cases where things have gone as far as a final judgment, but an actual physical eviction can't take place with the CDC moratorium in place. And then somebody gets caught up with rental assistance dollars, and then they re-up the lease. Now they're in a new tenancy, but in a couple of cases, at least, our friends at Legal Aid are telling us landlords are trying to go back and use the previous judgment under the previous tenancy. The judge says, no, wait a minute, you can't do that. This is a new instance, a new lease. But how often does that happen? We don't have data. We have anecdotes, right? And what's that old adage that the plural of anecdotes is not data?
I think, yes, I would say though perhaps the natural language processing researcher in me would suggest that could be data. I'm a data scientist, and obviously that's the first tool I reach to when I think about how we might solve a problem. But I know in conversations that we've had, something that's been illuminating is not only what is represented in the data, and Orange County does have one of the better data systems, but also starting to understand what is missed. I know I've heard you speak about people who are applying for rental assistance need rental assistance, but are they representative of the people who need it the most? So I wonder, kind of in our last comments here, if you could elaborate on what would you like to see in the data, and what are the stories that you're hoping to tell to people who are building out these systems?
What we see happen a lot of times in rental assistance programs with cities and counties, and we're hearing this in our work in other parts of the state as well as from other colleagues, is that by and large, the people at the front of the line to get rental assistance are more affluent. They've lost a job, but they're more likely to have high-speed internet at home. They've got a printer, they've got a scanner, they have their financial documents in order, so that it's fairly easy for them to print out what they need, fill out the form, sign it, scan it back. They're good to go. They get their dollars. They're at the front of the line. The communities that are most vulnerable, though, are communities of color, women-headed households, seniors, families with limited English proficiency. These folks most need these dollars and are least likely to get them, right? They are less likely to have a good high-speed internet connection at home, very unlikely to have the printer and the scanner and everything else you need to fill out and sign and scan back documents. And so it needs a lot more outreach from trusted community partners. It isn't sufficient to put up a website. What we need is a church in the community, a child care center, a food pantry, some other kind of a neighborhood nonprofit that has these relationships that can go work with people one-on-one, get that paperwork filled out. And so we're hopeful to see the next iteration of this show, not just what does the data tell us about where are the neighborhoods that most need the help, but where are the community assets, right? How do we map who can help us get these, who's on the front lines in these neighborhoods that can really help us intervene and get the resources to the people who are most vulnerable and most need them.
What a powerful statement to say. Not only do we need the data to tell us where we need to go, but we need to enable individuals to help their communities do that work as well. I'll hand it back to you, Lauren, to pick up on that from the fireside chat conversations to give it over for our last couple.
Yes.
Thanks, Caitlin, and thanks, Lauren. This was great.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you, Caitlin and Frank. And I want to say it out loud what Frank and Caitlin was stressing. We need to center equity in the design and implementation in data, because we need to not only look at the racial inequities that may be present in helping those who may not have access, but that counts for people with limited English who have disabilities. I'm excited